You say, "This is just how I am." Jung would say, no, that is how your unconscious is. Most people live their entire lives believing they know themselves. They have a clear sense of who they are, their preferences, their values, their personality. But that clarity is an illusion, because what you call your personality is often just a collection of unconscious patterns, reactions you inherited, behaviors you learned, defense mechanisms you built without realizing it. You think you're making choices, but most of the time, you're just repeating scripts written years ago by your parents, by your environment, by experiences you've long forgotten but never processed. People think their habits are personality, that the way they react to stress is just who they are, that their triggers are natural, that their patterns are inherent, but they're not. They're learned, programmed, conditioned. You learn to shut down when criticized because vulnerability wasn't safe. You learn to control everything because chaos felt dangerous. You learn to people please because rejection was unbearable. None of that is who you are. It's how you adapted. And until you recognize that, until you separate your true self from your conditioned responses, you'll keep mistaking programming for identity. Many reactions are unconscious patterns, automatic responses to situations that resemble old wounds. You're not choosing to react. You're being triggered into reacting. Someone criticizes you, and you immediately defend yourself. Not because the criticism is wrong, but because criticism once meant danger, rejection, abandonment. Someone gets close and you pull away, not because you don't want connection, but because closeness once led to pain, betrayal, loss. These aren't personality traits, they're survival strategies, and they're running in the background, directing your life without you even noticing. Trauma, upbringing, and suppressed desires shape behavior. The things you experienced but never processed, the emotions you felt but never expressed, the needs you had but never met. All of it is still there, buried, operating beneath the surface, and it's controlling you. What you call personality may just be programming. Most decisions are emotional, not logical. You tell yourself you're rational, that you weigh options carefully, that you make informed choices. But that's not how it works. The decision gets made unconsciously, emotionally, based on fears, desires, and patterns you're not aware of. And then your conscious mind creates a logical explanation for why you made that choice. You convince yourself it was rational, strategic, the best option, but really, you were just avoiding something that felt uncomfortable or chasing something that felt familiar. Your unconscious runs the show, and your conscious mind narrates afterward. Triggers reveal hidden wounds. Pay attention to what makes you react. Not just mildly uncomfortable, truly reactive, defensive, angry, shut down. Those reactions aren't about the present moment. They're about the past. Someone dismisses your idea and you feel rage, not annoyance, rage. That's not about the idea. That's about every time you were made to feel small, unimportant, unheard. Someone cancels plans and you spiral. Not disappointment, spiral. That's not about the plans. That's about every time someone left, every time you felt abandoned. Your triggers are breadcrumbs. They lead back to unprocessed wounds. And until you follow those breadcrumbs, until you understand what's actually being triggered, you'll keep reacting to the present as if it's the past. Repeated life problems are unconscious cycles. If the same problem keeps finding you, it's not fate. It's a pattern. You keep choosing the same type of partner, the the same type of friend, the same type of job, and every time it ends the same way. You tell yourself it's bad luck, that you just keep meeting the wrong people, that the world is against you, but it's not luck. It's unconscious repetition. You're drawn to what's familiar, even when familiar is painful, because your unconscious is trying to resolve something, trying to replay the original wound in hopes of a different outcome. You choose emotionally unavailable partners because you're still trying to earn love from a parent who withheld it. You sabotage success because you're still proving to yourself that you're not worthy. You create conflict in stable relationships because chaos is what feels like home. It's not fate. It's a cycle. And cycles don't break on their own. They repeat until you become conscious of them. Jung called it the shadow, the parts you hide, deny, or reject. Everyone has one. It's made of the traits you decided were unacceptable, the emotions you learned to suppress, the desires you were taught to be ashamed of, anger, envy, insecurity, ambition, selfishness, lust, all the things you push down. Pretend you don't feel. Convince yourself you're above. But they don't disappear. They just go underground, into the shadow, and from there, they run your life without you realizing it. The anger you suppress leaks out as passive aggression, as resentment, as silent punishment. The envy you deny shows up as judgment, as criticism of others' success, as finding flaws in what you secretly want. The insecurity you hide drives you to overcompensate, to prove yourself constantly, to need validation you'll never feel satisfied by. The shadow doesn't disappear when ignored. It waits, and it influences everything. Your reactions, your relationships, your choices, because what you don't acknowledge, you can't control. The traits you judge in others often exist in you. This is the hardest part to accept. The people who irritate you the most, the behaviors that trigger you, the qualities you despise. They're mirrors. You're not reacting to them. You're reacting to the parts of yourself you've disowned. You hate arrogance because you've suppressed your own desire to be seen as important. You despise neediness because you've denied your own need for connection. You judge people who take up space because you've made yourself small. Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The shadow is showing you what you've rejected, and until you reclaim those parts, until you integrate them, they'll keep controlling you from the dark. Awareness is the first act of control. You can't change what you're not aware of. You can't heal what you won't acknowledge. You can't break patterns you don't see. So the first step is simple. Notice. Notice emotional reactions. When something makes you feel more than the situation warrants, stop. Don't just react and move on. Ask yourself, why did that trigger me? Not what the other person did wrong, not how to defend yourself, but why that specific thing caused that specific reaction. What wound did it touch? What old story did it activate? What part of you felt threatened? Most people never ask these questions. They just react, justify, blame. And the pattern continues. But if you pause, if you get curious instead of defensive, you start to see the pattern. Observe patterns without judging them. This is critical. You can't heal through shame. You can't integrate the shadow by hating it. You have to observe it neutrally. Not, I'm so messed up for feeling this way. But, interesting, I always react this way in this type of situation. I wonder why. Curiosity, not judgment, because judgment keeps things hidden. Curiosity brings them to light. Self-reflection equals psychological power. Most people avoid self-reflection because it's uncomfortable, because it forces them to see things they'd rather ignore. But that avoidance is exactly what keeps them stuck, repeating the same cycles, making the same mistakes, blaming the same external factors. The people who do the work, who sit with themselves, who ask the hard questions, they're the ones who break free. Not because they're better, but because they're willing to see what's really there. And once you see it, you can work with it. You can choose differently, respond differently, be different, not by forcing change, but by understanding what was driving the old behavior in the first place. Life begins the moment you see yourself clearly, not the version you show, the version you hide. Most people live their entire lives performing, pretending, hiding parts of themselves they think are unacceptable, and in doing so, they stay trapped in patterns, trapped in roles, trapped in identities that were never truly theirs. But when you make the unconscious conscious, everything shifts. You stop blaming fate. You stop telling yourself things just happen to you, that you're unlucky, that life is unfair. You start seeing your role in the patterns, the ways you unconsciously recreate the same situations, the ways you attract what feels familiar, not what's healthy. And once you see that, you can change it. You stop repeating cycles, the same relationships, the same conflicts, the same self-sabotage. It all becomes visible. And visibility is power. Because you can't break a cycle you don't see. But once you see it, once you understand it, you can choose differently. Not perfectly, not immediately, but gradually, consciously. You stop being a prisoner of your past. The unconscious keeps you chained to old wounds, old stories, old versions of yourself. You react through the lens of the past, protecting yourself from dangers that no longer exist. But when you become conscious and integrate the shadow, the past loses its grip. Life begins when you see yourself clearly, not just what you show, but what you hide.